Welcome back, focused learners. Today's explainer is a wild one. We're unpacking a true story that sits right smack at the intersection of investigative journalism, international intelligence, and, honestly, one of the most enduring public mysteries out there. We're talking about Gary Webb. Back in the 90s, this American journalist dug up a story so explosive it allegedly shook some of the most powerful people in Washington right to their core. But you know what makes this whole thing so compelling and so deeply tragic is how it all ended. See, a lot of folks out there believe his investigation put him squarely in the crosshairs of powerful intelligence agencies, kicking off a chain of events that led to an absolute tragedy. So we're going to break down exactly what he found, the intense fallout that happened next, and those lingering questions that still have Americans captivated today.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this story actually demands that we start right near its tragic end, 2. That number is literally the focal point of a mystery that is still hotly debated decades later. So on December 10, 2004, Gary Webb was found dead in his California home. But the detail that instantly set off nationwide speculation, it was the exact manner of his death. According to the official reports, Gary Webb suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head. I mean, for an investigative journalist who had just recently taken on some of the most powerful institutions on the planet, you can imagine how quickly that single jarring detail sparked a massive public reaction.
Now, despite the really unusual nature of the scene, authorities ultimately ruled Gary Webb's death a suicide. To understand how they got there, we gotta look at the forensic conclusion. Investigators determined that the first shot was not instantly fatal, which they say allowed for a second, final shot. Now, it's absolutely crucial to note here that medical experts completely acknowledge these circumstances are incredibly rare, like extremely rare. But they also confirm that cases like this do in fact occasionally happen. So authorities relied on this medical precedent to finalize their ruling, officially closing the book on the investigation from a legal standpoint.
Section 1. A Mysterious Death, the Tragic End of Gary Webb.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the total split in how people reacted, because while the authorities might have closed the case, the American public absolutely did not. His death immediately set off this massive, sprawling controversy that just rippled right across the country. You had this deep divide emerge almost instantly. On one side, you've got the official conclusion, right? People arguing there's absolutely zero evidence of foul play, and that we just need to accept this tragic suicide ruling. But on the flip side, you had this explosion of public speculation. I mean, internet forums completely blew up. Radio hosts were dedicating hours of airtime to dissecting every little detail of the case. Conspiracy theories just multiplied overnight, with a huge chunk of people firmly believing that Webb was deliberately silenced for the secrets he dug up.
So, that brings us to a really crucial question. How does a highly respected, award-winning investigative reporter end up at the very center of such a dark, deeply debated mystery? Well, to figure that out, we can't just look at how he died. We actually have to rewind a bit. We need to go back in time and look at what he lived for, what he wrote, and the exact source of this whole massive controversy.
Section 2. Uncovering the Dark Alliance, the 1996 investigation.
It is so vital to establish right off the bat that Gary Webb was not some fringe conspiracy theorist. Not at all. He was an incredibly diligent, award-winning investigative journalist. And in 1996, he published this deeply researched newspaper series that would go on to define his entire career. He called it Dark Alliance. Now, the crucial thing here is understanding exactly what this series claimed, because honestly, it contained one of the boldest accusations in modern journalism. Webb's investigation alleged that individuals closely connected to the CIA-backed Contra rebel forces in Nicaragua were directly linked to massive drug trafficking networks. And the real bombshell? He claimed these specific networks actually helped fuel the devastating crack cocaine epidemic that was just ravaging American cities at the time. So he was essentially drawing a straight line from covert geopolitical ops in Central America right to the struggles happening in local American neighborhoods. This was a monumental, deeply complex geopolitical claim that absolutely shook powerful people in Washington.
And the impact? It was immediate and completely explosive. These articles didn't just quietly circulate. They caused total nationwide outrage. People all across the country, but especially in the communities hit hardest by the crack epidemic, were demanding answers. The public wanted accountability right then and there, and the pressure on the government to respond to Webb's reporting was just immense.
Section 3. The Backlash and Collapse, a Career Under Fire. Now, as you might guess, when you strike at institutions that powerful, the pushback is often just as forceful. And the narrative takes a much more somber turn right here, because Webb faced an unprecedented wave of resistance. Just looking at how rapidly this all builds, in 1996, Dark Alliance hits the press. Shortly after, boom, massive national outrage. But then, just months later, the tide really turns.
government officials aggressively started denying any wrongdoing whatsoever. And in a move that surprised a lot of folks, major media organizations actually began relentlessly challenging Webb's reporting, picking apart his methodology, questioning his conclusions. Over the following years, this orchestrated pushback led to the total collapse of his once stellar career, which ultimately brings us right up to the tragic events of 2004.
The personal toll all of this took on Gary Webb is really just heartbreaking to look at. As the heat intensified, his own newspaper eventually distanced itself from the Dark Alliance story. Friends later recalled that during this time, Webb felt profoundly isolated. He was under enormous psychological and professional pressure. Yet, even as his career was completely falling apart around him, he still stood his ground. He continued to fiercely defend parts of his investigation right up until the very end.
Section 4. Legacy and Lingering Questions, the Truth and the Mystery.
If we zoom out from the immediate tragedy of Webb's passing, we really have to look at the broader legacy of his work. Because while the man himself was gone, the story he uncovered, and specifically that alleged CIA connection, kept the mystery very much alive in the public consciousness. And this brilliantly illustrates how complicated the aftermath really was. Years after the initial controversy, there was actually an official acknowledgement. Later government reports confirmed that, some individuals associated with the Contra movement had indeed been involved in drug trafficking activities. Now, the extent of what the CIA actually knew about it, or their level of direct involvement, that remains highly debated to this day. But for a lot of Americans, this official validation of at least a piece of Webb's core claim ended up raising infinitely more questions than it answered. Which brings us right back to the central debate here. Was Gary Webb's death simply a deeply tragic personal event brought on by the immense, crushing stress of a collapsed career? Or did an investigative reporter uncover something so incredibly powerful that he made enemies he never even expected? Now, it is absolutely vital to state clearly right here that, to this day, no definitive evidence has ever proven a conspiracy, period. The official ruling stands, but the public debate, fueled by those later government admissions, it continues to thrive. Because of this unique intersection of proven historical facts, deeply guarded intelligence secrets, and a highly unusual, tragic death, Webb's case remains one of the most discussed mysteries involving a journalist in modern American history. Decades later, despite all the official investigations and reports, people are still out there asking the exact same question: what really happened to Gary Webb?
I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder today. When a journalist uncovers secrets connected to powerful institutions, how do you know where the truth ends and the mystery begins? It's one of those questions that really challenges us to think critically about power, about journalism, and about the narratives we just accept as history. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I will see you next time.